So I've done dozens of high-end guitar comparisons on my channel, and there's one guitar that keeps coming out on top as your favorite. And that's my Gibson 1959 Les Paul reissue. So I own several boutique Les Paul alternatives, and I personally favor them over the Gibson Les Paul. However, in the audience's mind and heart, the Les Paul keeps coming out on top. So that got me curious. Why is that? Is the Les Paul really a superior guitar, or is there more psychological reasons at play? And so I wanted to explore that topic today to find out if and why the Les Paul can't be beat. So I'll compare my Les Paul with one of my favorite boutique Les Paul alternatives, the Johann Gustavsson Bluesmaster 59 Limited. So I'll talk about the specs of each guitar, as well as do several sound comparisons, and along the way, I'll share some of my thoughts around why I think the Les Paul is perceived to be unbeatable. And I'll be really curious for your perspective on this as we go. So let's dive in. So this is a 2019 Gibson Les Paul 1959 reissue. This one was spec'd by Wildwood Guitars, which means they picked out the woods and also had Gibson do a slight underwine on the custom buckers to give it a more vintage PAF vibe. It's a great sounding guitar. 2019 was a real inflection year in terms of implementing some more accurate specs. Gibson's got a long history of being notorious for every year coming out with a more authentic version of the burst, but the specs haven't really changed much since 2019 other than the Murphy Lab, where you can get a more genuine nitro formula on those guitars. And this one happened to be painted by Tom Murphy, and it's just a killer all around Les Paul. So up first, let's compare the neck, middle, and bridge positions, and let me know what tonal differences you're picking up on. What I'm assuming is the lesser known guitar among many of you is the Johann Gustavsson Bluesmaster 59 Limited. Johann's a luthier out of Sweden, and he's highly revered among boutique guitar enthusiasts. He procures the best materials and is just a world-class luthier, and he's come up with his own unique spin on the 1959 burst design. You can see where it deviates is, of course, the Telly-inspired single-cut body shape, Johann's headstock design, and rather than an ABR1 and stop tail, it's an all-in-one bridge. But otherwise, the build construction and materials and electronics are all Les Paul. However, there are some differences in spec. I believe Johann is using old-growth Honduran mahogany, which is what the original bursts were using. This guitar also has a Brazilian rosewood fingerboard. This guitar has a genuine nitro lacquer finish. I'll try to show some of the checking. This one has a hard rock maple top, which is really beautiful. It has a lot of subtle but 3D flame patterns in it, and also quite a bit of mineral streaks, which I love and think it gives it a really authentic vintage vibe. Johann's headstock also has straighter string pull behind the nut for better tuning stability. This one has a C-shaped neck, super comfortable. And lastly, this one has throwback pickups. So one of the things I really love to do with Les Paul style guitars is take advantage of the separate volume and tone pots for each pickup. There's so many unique tonal blends that you can get by adjusting the taper of each pot. So I'm going to start in the neck pickup with some medium overdrive. I'm using a Vemram Janray boosted with an exotic soul driven. I'm going to roll the neck pickup back slightly to clean up the tone. And then I'm going to switch into the middle and bridge positions, and you'll hear the gain go up to see how the character changes based on where the volume pots are set. So let's check that out. So far, I'm finding the Johann Gustavsson Bluesmaster to be a little brighter and have a bit more character than the Gibson Les Paul. And playing-wise, this guitar is just a joy to play. The touch sensitivity and responsiveness, the perceived sustain, and the way the guitar resonates in your hands is truly next level. And while my Les Paul is a great example, it doesn't offer that same playing experience. And so unfortunately, on the other side of the camera, there's no way for you to get to experience some of those particular differences between the two guitars. So I'll be relying more on you for your eyes and your ears and what you're perceiving in my playing. So one of the first reasons I believe that the Les Paul keeps coming out on top in many of my sound comparison videos is simply the fact that it's the original de facto dual humbucker solid body set neck guitar design. So when it comes to that sound, there's one original, everything else is a replica. If you find a good Les Paul, it's a sound that's really hard to beat. So up next, let's go to the middle position. It's one of my favorites on a Les Paul. In particular, I love the chime of the middle position. So let's see what these two guitars sound like in that context. Some of the other reasons that folks perceive that the Les Paul can't be beat, I believe, are more psychological than anything else. The first of these factors is associations. The Les Paul is an iconic guitar. It has a legacy. It's associated with famous formative music, famous formative artists, and it's just the sound and look that everybody has come to love. And so it just has an unfair advantage when being compared to a newer guitar that doesn't have the same legacy or associations. And another factor, especially relevant in the YouTube environment, we tend to listen not only with our ears, but also with our eyes, and we can be fooled quite easily. And the Les Paul has another advantage here, as it's considered to be one of the most beautiful electric guitar designs in history. And so when these video comparisons come up, it's really hard not to be biased. When you see a Les Paul, it just looks right and it looks beautiful. And so I think that's another advantage the Les Paul has in these comparison videos. So up next, I'm gonna go into high gain mode using the bridge pickup. I'm gonna be using a Vemmer M Janray boosted by my BK Butler tube driver. Let's see how the guitars compare in that context. The last psychological factor that I think advantages the Les Paul is the brand recognition. The Gibson brand has a ton of equity among guitar players. It's been around for decades and decades. You've got the iconic Gibson headstock and logo, and it conjures up all that nostalgia and reverence for all the great music that have been made on these guitars, as well as all the artists that have used them over the decades. So that's quite an unfair advantage when you see a new guitar that you're unfamiliar with that doesn't have that same brand equity, brand recognition, nor does it have the long legacy of famous players or albums being recorded on the guitar. So really the brand recognition and brand equity aren't really comparable between the two instruments. Now personally, that's something that I really appreciate and value within the boutique guitar offerings. I actually enjoy playing a guitar design that doesn't have some of those associations, because for me it's more of a blank canvas where I'm not thinking of famous artists or music that I associate with the guitar, so I can be more open and in tune with myself in terms of what I want to play and create. All right, the time has come to revisit the intro music and A/B both guitars in that context to see what differences we can hear. All right, so I'm really curious to know which guitar you're preferring and why. Are you finding yourself drawn into the Les Paul? And do you think it's because of the sound, or do you think it's because of some of the strong associations that this guitar conjures up? Or are you finding yourself more drawn to the Johann Gustavsson, and why? Is it the tone? Is it the look? Very curious for your thoughts. Personally, when I listen back, I find both guitars really do sound awesome. I do have some personal preferences. I love the voice of the Johann Gustavsson. I find it to be a bit more articulate, touch sensitive. It just resonates more when I'm playing it, and it's an overall funner playing experience for me. However, the Gibson Les Paul sounds killer. I did find myself preferring it on the intro music. It just has that iconic voice that suited that part perfectly. This topic had me wondering, hypothetically, if you could go back in time and swap out all the original bursts with a Johann Gustavsson Bluesmaster 59, would that have changed the trajectory of music as we know it today? Would this guitar be the iconic guitar with all that nostalgia, or would it not? Very curious to your thoughts. There's no right or wrong answer there, but it might be fun to talk about. If you found yourself intrigued with the Bluesmaster 59, let me know. I've got a second Bluesmaster 59, which is a slightly different model. This is the limited version, this is the standard version. So I'd be happy to do a future video comparing both guitars and explaining the differences. If you have any interest, let me know. So that wraps it up. Let me know which guitar you preferred and why. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you in the next video.